Hey everybody, it's Andrew Austin of the FAR podcast, the podcast associated with the Freedom and Reason blog. You can read the blog at andrewaustin.blog. I have a new environment here, and you can see there's a couple of flaws I have right over there. The green screen, the sun is now moved over into the sky, and I have the windows open, so I'm using natural lighting to affect the green screen. And it's quite bright outside. We've had a hell of a snowstorm. I think I'm looking at my garage out there, and it looks to be 15, 20 inches of snow has fallen. They predicted 4, and then they said, wait a second, we're probably going to have 6 to 8 on top of the 4, and then it just kept going. This is late March, so it's March 25th, I guess today is. So I haven't seen you in a while, or you haven't seen me in a while. And I did a one-off recently in front of the fireplace, low-tech affair. I wanted to talk about some issues with the criminal justice system. I want to get back to regularly blogging. But I wanted to create a new environment. And so you can see here I have a nice green wall, which is not symbolic of anything. It's just when the sun's in the right place, when the lighting is right, it does help me overcome some of the issues that I have with green screening. I have a lot of elements, virtual elements I'm using here. And I have white hair, so I still have to wear a hat because green screens don't play well with white-haired old men. But the neon sign is the latest edition, and I kind of like it. I like the purple, and I like the video display that I've created here and so forth. Before I get to what I want to talk to you about, I just want to encourage you to like my YouTube channel and subscribe, and come back and visit often. If you subscribe, you'll get a notification, let you know when new content is up. And so the new content is up almost every day, really, over at the blog. I write a lot, and I feel driven to write a lot because I'm analyzing the world and coming to some conclusions about the world, and that you might find interesting, at least, if not useful. What I'm going to move to is a interview conducted by Steve Bannon. He is interviewing, this is on his program, War Room, and he's going to be interviewing Alan Dershowitz, who defended Donald Trump in the Senate during the first trial, where Trump, they really wanted to try to impeach him over, but everybody understood it was a hoax, the Russian collusion. So then the Ukraine thing came along, and they thought that was obscure enough to where they could get him on that. Of course, they weren't really that interested in, I think, or weren't that concerned about getting a conviction. They mainly just wanted to impeach him, to be able to say that they impeached him. And of course, it's important for you to understand that being impeached is not being convicted. And impeachment is sort of like a grand jury finding, and then it goes to trial, and then you're either convicted or you're acquitted. So he was acquitted, and that's the important part. So, yeah, he was impeached by Democrats who dominated the House, and then he was acquitted in the Senate. They couldn't get the votes to convict. Then he was, and that was a false issue. The Ukrainian thing was a false issue. And then he was impeached for the January 6th fiasco, or however you want to describe it. People called it an insurrection. I'm not going to, because I don't think it was. There were riots, but the police were rioting. It could accurately be described as a police riot. I'm not going to get into the details of that. But I am going to say that Donald Trump himself, in the event that he held, was was a perfectly legitimate event. It was what's the permitted affair. The President of the United States has the same right to free speech as everybody else has. They assembled there to seek redress for the grievances, and their grievances had to do with certain certifications of states in the 2020 election. He has freedom of association. And so there was nothing untoward about that event. And in fact, he encouraged the people in attendance, and tens of thousands of people, not hundreds of thousands of people, but at least tens of thousands of people. He wanted to make sure and told them that to be peaceful, to be patriotic, but let their voices be heard, which is everybody's right. Now I'm not going to get into the details of all of that because I don't want to. Alan Dershowitz is going to explain a lot of this, so I don't need to. But I do want to say something briefly about how people respond to Steve Bannon, to Trump, and why Dershowitz is here talking about what he's talking about. There's this view that Trump is so awful that he doesn't deserve to have the same constitutional rights as everybody else. He shouldn't be able to speak freely. He shouldn't be able to challenge an election. He shouldn't be able to call the Secretary of State of Georgia and ask him to find more votes. That he shouldn't be able to have an attorney defend him in a court of law and so forth. It's really a really bizarre view of things, and it reveals a loathing of the Constitution, a loathing of basic, really human rights and civil liberties. You can disagree with a person, but that does not mean that they are not entitled. In fact, this is the way that authoritarians think. They'll cite, liberty and freedom and rights and all that they will speak up for people on that basis if they agree with that person or they like that person. If they don't, then they don't believe they're entitled to those rights. And that's not the way rights work. Rights apply to everybody, whether you agree with them or not. Free speech applies to everybody, whether you agree with them or not. And we're seeing this on the street level with Antifa and the trans activists and other so-called left-wing groups, which are shutting down in college campuses and in other public spaces, shutting down of speech being exercised lawfully and legitimately. And they're shutting it down using violence. They're shutting it down by shouting it down. In other words, depriving free speech rights and then claiming in a bizarre way that somehow that is itself. Free speech goes both ways. No, you don't have the right to raise a ruckus and prevent somebody from speaking and other people from hearing what that person is saying. That's not free speech. It's suppression. And so what we're seeing on the so-called left is this growing quote-unquote legitimacy. They're viewing this as being a legitimate thing to do, to engage in suppression of speech, suppression of thought. And at the same time, we're seeing, because of progressive control over the technocratic apparatus and the administrative state, we're talking the academy, the corporate media, the culture industry, etc. We're seeing our children being indoctrinated. We're seeing the public being propagandized, and groups that challenge the transnationalization of the global economy that is providing a political and legal framework that transcends nation states, which requires the dismantling of nation states. We're seeing that being promulgated as a good thing, and people who oppose that are being portrayed as fascist, extremist, and so forth. So when parents object to the way that their children are being indoctrinated in public schools, they're being portrayed as domestic terrorists and so forth. So I could go on obviously for a long time, talking about this. Read my blog. I'm covering these issues on almost a daily basis. My blog today actually deals with the parental rights in education, the bill that passed, I think it was Thursday, and then the Democrats taking to microphones to accuse Republicans of being fascist. When in fact, what you see with this street level violence that's been occurring over the last several years with the suppression tactics I just described, you're actually seeing the so-called left is revealing themselves as the subaltern forces of a new fascism. And we're in an Orwellian moment where up is down, left is right. And the actual fascistic attitude, the authoritarian personality type, all of that is being manifest on the so-called left among the progressives, whereas on the political right, we're seeing a revival of democratic Republican values, of liberal desire, and a restoration of the Republican forms of government over against a globalized corporate state, which is intrinsically, those arrangements are intrinsically illiberal and undemocratic. So when you watch Bannon talking to Dershowitz, a lot of the people I really want to, who I want to see this, are the last people to see it, because they're not going to watch Steve Bannon's War Room. They think Steve Bannon is a horrible, horrible person. So I'm bringing it here in on this podcast. Now, I would just say, why don't you watch it and see what it's about? But I can't make you watch it. So if you don't, you don't. But for those of you who are interested, here is Steve Bannon and Alan Dershowitz.
Getter has arrived. The new social media taking on big tech, protecting free speech, and canceling cancel culture. Join the marketplace of ideas. The platform for independent thought has arrived. Superior technology. No more selling your personal data. No more censorship. No more cancel culture. Enough. Getter has arrived. It's time to say what you want, the way you want. Download now.
Okay, welcome back. Professor Alan Dershowitz joins us from Harvard. He's got this new book, Get Trump. I'm going to get to the book in a second, and particularly President Trump has put it up on Truth Social and is promoting it. Professor, you've dedicated your life to the law and to the teaching of the law, to the Constitution. What we have here, what shocks me is that the institutions that are this rabid foaming at the mouth to actually get Trump, it's much deeper than just President Trump. You have the New York District Attorney, which is used to be a revered institution, the Southern District of New York. You've got the federal court in Washington, D.C. You have these institutions of people who went to the best law schools, who worked at the best law firms, the white shoe law firms, who have worked, as prosecutors or DAs at these revered institutions. And it is now like a banana republic. How did that happen? And how deep and serious is this problem for our nation, even besides President Trump, sir?
Look, I never would have written the book Get Trump if it was just about President Trump. I've written books about him before. This is about the corrosive effect of Get Trump and similar approaches on the rule of law. And it's very, very serious. Judges are afraid now to do anything that will be seen as enabling Trump or helping Trump. They know they'll be treated the way I was treated, totally dismissed by friends and family on the left just because I defended him on the floor of the Senate. Jurors would be afraid to render a verdict in favor of Trump for fear that they would be ostracized in their community. An atmosphere of fear and hatred has been created so that if anybody dares to do anything that's perceived as not only pro-Trump, but pro-Constitution, they are completely canceled. And you don't expect people necessarily to take the kinds of risks. Look, I have a thick skin, but my wife has been attacked. My family has been attacked. My wife went to a gym And a woman walked in and said, "That's Alan Dershowitz's wife. He defended Trump. I can't be in the same room as him." Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of President Kennedy, was seated next to me at a dinner party. And she said, "If I knew you had been invited, I would never have come." That's the kind of treatment people can expect if they try to apply the rule of law. And so the hard left has been successful in terrorizing centrist people, good judges, good prosecutors, good jurors, into fearing for their own safety and their children's safety and their integrity and their reputations if they do anything that's perceived as pro-Trump or pro-Constitution on behalf of Trump. That's how serious this question is now.
I'm going to go back. You're saying judges. Drill down on there for a second. It's bad enough these prosecutors. You actually believe that judges have been intimidated by the left here in either looking the other way or not rendering the types of judgments that they would normally render, sir?
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. I know judges. I taught many of the judges who are now sitting on the federal and state benches. They are terrified of not being promoted, of being ostracized. Anybody who's perceived of as having enabled or done anything to support Trump's return to the presidency, their career is over. Their career is ruined. They will be canceled in every possible way. And of course it affects judges. It particularly affects elected judges like in New York, but it also affects appointed judges. Every district court judge wants to be a Court of Appeals judge. Every Court of Appeals judge wants to be a Supreme Court justice. Can you imagine any judge rendering a decision in favor of Trump getting promoted by this administration, or in the city of New York, in Manhattan, or New York State, or Washington, D.C.? It's unthinkable, and everybody knows it. And judges are human beings. Judges have to go home to their wives. I know when I defended Trump, I had to go home to my wife and my family and my friends, and they were not on my side. They said, all right, you believe in the Constitution, we understand that, but can't you make an exception for Trump? And I said, no, I won't make an exception for Trump. And it's had a big impact on my life, and people know that. And people have told me they don't want to be Dershowitzed. They don't want to have happen to them what happened to me. And of course this affects judges. Of course it affects jurors. Of course it affects prosecutors. It affects everybody in the legal system. It affects law students. It affects law deans. It affects literally everybody. Nobody wants to be treated that way. I've been canceled by institutions that had me speak for years and years and years and years. They don't want anybody who had any connection with Trump, whether in representation or defending his rights and defending the constitutional rights. So this is a kind of new McCarthyism that has permeated our society, and it's going to only get worse, not better.
Let's go back. I want to ask about the moment you made the decision to defend President Trump in the first impeachment. When you weighed and measured it, why, against all the pressure you knew you were going to get from all your associations, friends, family, institutions, why did you make that decision?
Because my life would have otherwise been hypocritical. I defended Nazis. I defended communists. I defended O.J. Simpson. I defended Jeffrey Epstein. And if I wouldn't defend Trump, people would say, oh, my God, you just select and pick. No, I defend the Constitution on behalf of everybody. Now, I'm not making comparisons between Trump and some of these other people. I'm just saying that if I accepted my wife's advice, my family's advice, my children's advice, and did not defend Trump, I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't say that I've lived a life of principle in which I always put the Constitution before politics or before personal interests. So I had to do it. People ask me if I regret it. Well, I regret the consequences, particularly to my children. I have a member of my family who was thinking about changing her name because she was so proud of the name Dershowitz. I had done so much good, and people loved me for defending some people that they like. But once I defended Trump, she was thinking about changing her name because she was getting terrible pushback from people in her profession and everywhere else. And so nobody wants to bear those costs. And so today, the social pressures have become weapons in the war against the Constitution. And people insist on putting, and I understand it, their personal interests over the interests of the Constitution. I won't do that. I have suffered severe consequences. I wrote a book called The Price of Liberty. But I'm going to continue to do that. But
Professor,
for my family.
Can you hang on for just 90 seconds? We're going to take a 90-second break. We'll return with Professor Alan Dershowitz of Harvard in a moment.
We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP.
Okay, so that's we're watching Real America's Voice. This is the channel. I was watching it on Pluto TV for a number of years, and there's being live streaming. Steve Bannon does 4 hours, 5 days a week. So he does 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and then on Saturday he does another 2 hours. This is where you go if you're interested in learning about conservative thought. What are conservatives thinking? Fox News is almost, except for Tucker Carlson, is useless now. It really is. And here you get, and this will, I'm sure, shock people, that they can't imagine, why on earth would you listen to conservative programming? Well, because I'm open-minded, and I think it's very important to listen to people with whom you disagree. You also discover that conservatives aren't evil people. They're not bad people. They're not stupid people. That they actually have good ideas, and in fact, modern conservatives are more liberal than those progressives who claim to be liberal, and who are becoming quite illiberal in their attitude, as I talk about a lot on my blog. I think they'll show, there's even Ted Nugent has programmed it. I missed that when I was gathering my thoughts. But Ted Nugent has a program on here. Let's see. I think, so you get Breaking Point. You got Firewall. Okay, we go back.
This is the primal scream of a dying regime. Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot at all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish, in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
It's Saturday, 25 March, in the year of our Lord 2023. The massive rally today in Waco. We'll have Mike Lindell and others on here to discuss it. We have Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, you talk about the corrosive effect. You talked about your personal life, your family, your friends when you defended President Trump to defend the Constitution. That corrosive effect, how can we, because President Trump right now, and we got Politico's story this morning, The Guardian, NBC News, all saying right now he's essentially running the tables on Ron DeSantis. He is going to be the Republican nominee, so he's not going away anytime soon, right? And our strong belief when we look at the numbers, he's going to return to the White House in 2025. Project down the road. It's bad now, but what's going to happen, sir, to the legal system?
Well, it's much worse. It will become much worse because people will take desperate measures to prevent him from becoming president. They will stretch the Constitution, stretch the law. But I got a letter the other day from somebody saying he was a strong DeSantis supporter, but now he's going to vote for Trump, just to show protests against how he's being treated legally and protests about our legal system. I think another good protest is to keep my book, Get Trump, a bestseller, because that sends a message to Bragg and others. People are watching you. There's accountability. There's historical accountability. Your children look back at you in 10 years and say, oh, my God, were you part of that Get Trump? Were you part of the McCarthyism of the 2020s? Were you part of undoing the Constitution? Were you part of this process of helping to destroy the American legal system? So I wrote the book, Get Trump, not so much about Trump himself, but to assure the American public that there are ways of fighting back. Look, Trump himself has mixed feelings about me. In his recent thing on the social media, here's what he says. Alan enjoys saying, I didn't vote for Trump. I believe he probably did. He just used that phrase for added credibility. But it doesn't matter. He's a brilliant guy who wrote a very important and special book. It's called Get Trump. So, look, every time I meet with President Trump, he asked me, why don't you vote for me? I was the best president ever for Israel. And he was. I was the best president ever for the Jewish community and fighting against anti-Semitism on campus. And he was. And yet, you know, when people vote for a variety of factors. I am a traditional liberal Democrat, and I don't know who I'm going to vote for in the next election. It depends who the people are on both sides of the ballot. But I never put politics before the Constitution. I will defend people who I disagree with, and I have for years. And this attack on Trump is one of the worst abuses of the legal profession I've ever seen. I've been doing this for 60 years. I've never seen a greater abuse of prosecutorial discretion than by District Attorney Bragg, who's making up crimes, just making them up out of whole cloth. I have never seen a weaker case presented to a grand jury than this case. Now, we don't know what the results will be. Maybe some grand jurors will revolt. It would be a precedent-setting thing if a couple of grand jurors said, look, no, we're not going to do this. Yes, the expression is that a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. We're not that grand jury. We're not going to indict Donald Trump just because you don't want him to be president of the United States. We're going to apply the rule of law. And I hope grand jurors do that. I hope there are some people in Bragg's office who will quit and say, no, you can't put Cohen on the witness stand. You know he's a liar. And prosecutors are not allowed to call witnesses who they know will lie to the jury. That's a disbarable offense. And can anybody imagine Bragg looking himself in the mirror and saying, oh, I really think this time Cohen will tell the truth. He lied to Congress. He lied to his lawyers. He lied to the other grand jury. He lied. But this time he's going to tell the truth because I'm the prosecutor. Could any prosecutor really look himself in the mirror and say that? I do not believe that. And in Get Trump, my book, I go through all the 4 cases against Trump. Every single one of them is made up. Not a single one of them has any basis. Consider, for example, the case in Georgia. He made a phone call in which he said, I need to find, F-I-N-D, find 13,000 votes. Look up find in the dictionary. It means something's there to be found. It's not something to be made up or concocted. That isn't a crime. That is a statement to a Secretary of State. I want you to look hard to see if there are any uncounted votes. You can't bring a criminal prosecution to that. You can't bring a criminal prosecution for a speech on January 6th in which the president says, I want you to go and peacefully and patriotically demonstrate. And then the January 6th committee in Congress doctors the tape and leaves out the words, those words, patriotically and peacefully. If a lawyer ever did that in a court document, that lawyer would be disbarred. So, yes, I'm angry. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm a supporter of the Constitution. And I do not want to see this effort to get Trump succeed and our Constitution trashed.
The book is Get Trump. It's explosive. It's from Tony Lyons and the great team over at Skyhorse. Professor Dershowitz. Yeah. Last question. You know Merrick Garland. He's not our cup of tea here, but he was a revered federal judge for liberal Democrats.
Yes.
What has happened to Merrick Garland in the Justice Department? Because this is deeper than just, there's something deeply wrong going on here. What do you think it is?
Well, I'm concerned. You know, I supported Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court. I thought the Republicans were wrong in denying him a hearing. He was a Harvard Law School graduate, a very distinguished judge. But when you get into politics, and the attorney generalship is a political position, it's an impossible position to hold, because on the one hand, you're supposed to be an objective law enforcement person. On the other hand, you're in the president's cabinet. You're trying to get him reelected. That's part of your job. It's an impossible job. And I think that Merrick Garland has tried hard to separate out the two roles of advisor to the president, helping him get elected, and an objective law enforcement officer. And I wish he would lean further in the direction of objective law enforcement officer and give up any political interests and cabinet interests. I don't think the Attorney General should be part of the cabinet. I think it should be an independent civil service job and held by very distinguished people who will apply the law fairly and equally and not allow themselves to be used as part of the weaponization of the criminal justice system against political enemies.
Professor Dershowitz goes through all 4 cases. The book is Get Trump. It's a must-read for the Trump movement. Professor, social media, how do people follow you on social media? What website do they go to get the book?
Well, just go on Amazon. It's already in the top, I think it's 35th of all the books in the country and 8th among the new bestseller of the new nonfiction books. So it's doing very well. But I think keeping it a bestseller is the most important message we can send to Bragg and others. So you can get it on Amazon.com. I also have a podcast called The Dersh Show, which is on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on Rumble and YouTube and other stations. So, I appreciate people following me, and I appreciate the fact that I not only have bipartisan hatred, but I have some bipartisan support. And I've always tried to be bipartisan. I've always tried to put the Constitution before politics. I hope I succeeded.
Professor, honored to have you on here. We will push hard the book, Get Trump. We want all of our audience to read it. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so let me let me go back here. Look, there's Mike Lindell. Well, we're not really interested in Mike right now. Okay. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and those
Never Trump, Hate Trump publications are reporting about.
There we go. Still trying to figure out that deal. Yeah, I think that speaks for itself. I don't have anything to add. Part of the dismantling of, I'll add this, part of the dismantling of the American Republic involves weaponizing the legal system against the political opponents of the party, capital P party, Democratic Party, and establishment Republicans who serve the interest of corporate state elites and corporate state interest in power. And I think it's crucial for you to understand that you may not like a lot of the positions that Republicans have. But the fact is that if this country continues to elect Democrats, we won't have a country because Democrats are completely in the service of the global elites. And they've been pursuing this project for a very long time. And I'm writing about it on my blog. You can read it there. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.